Solomon, the greatest king in biblical history, was granted unparalleled wisdom, immense power, and wealth beyond comparison by God. When people mention Solomon's name, they immediately think of Israel's golden age, a time when the nation rose to prominence not only militarily, but also culturally and commercially. Solomon's story is not just one of prosperity and wisdom, but also a profound reminder of human frailty in the face of temptation and desire. And in his exceptional wisdom, Solomon was not immune to falling into temptation, particularly that of women. From a young age, Solomon was chosen by God to be king. One night, in a dream, God appeared to him and asked what he desired. Instead of asking for longevity, wealth, or power, Solomon, with a humble and responsible heart, asked God for wisdom to govern his people fairly and wisely. This request pleased God, and as a result, Solomon was granted not only wisdom, but also wealth and glory beyond his expectations. Solomon's wisdom was not limited to personal intelligence, but extended to a deep understanding of complex situations, seeing things others could not, and making judgments that astonished even the most experienced elders. One of his most famous judgments was when two women came to him, both claiming to be the mother of a baby. With astute insight, Solomon suggested cutting the baby in half, an apparently cruel act intended to reveal the truth. The true mother, willing to give up her child to save its life, was quickly identified by Solomon. This judgment not only demonstrated his wisdom, but also reflected his compassionate heart, a king who was both just and kind. Under Solomon's reign, Israel became a powerful nation, strong in both military and economic terms. Trade agreements with surrounding nations brought unprecedented prosperity to the land. His wealth spread throughout the kingdom, from golden drinking cups to lavish palaces. The temple he built in Jerusalem was an architectural wonder of the time, symbolizing his loyalty to God and the pride of the entire nation of Israel. However, behind all that glory lay a bitter truth, a weakness no one could have predicted. In his quest for political alliances through marriages with women from various nations, Solomon's harem grew to include many wives and concubines. His harem was not just a symbol of wealth and power, but also became a sign of his weakness. With 700 wives and 300 concubines, the harem represented both prosperity and the chaos and complexity of politics and religion. The women Solomon brought into his palace were not only symbols of beauty and power, but also brought with them their religious beliefs and customs. They persuaded Solomon to build temples for their gods, leading to the worship of foreign deities in the Holy Land of Israel. Solomon's uncontrolled greed and desire for women caused him to lose the wisdom that God had given him. He not only lost his loyalty to God, but also weakened the faith of the entire nation of Israel. As warned by God, Solomon's downfall led to the collapse of the kingdom he had built. After his death, the kingdom was divided and eventually fell into the hands of enemies. The wisdom and wealth that had once been Solomon's pride became distant memories for the people. Solomon's story is not just one of rise and fall, but also a profound lesson about human nature. No matter how much wisdom, power, or wealth one possesses, if led by desires and temptations, that greatness can quickly turn into destruction. Stay tuned to discover more profound details about the highs and lows of Solomon, the wisest, but also one of the most susceptible kings in biblical history. Solomon, who would later become the wisest king in biblical history, had a complex and contradictory beginning. He was the son of King David and Bathsheba, a marriage born of sinful adultery. Bathsheba was initially the wife of Uriah, a loyal soldier in David's army. When Bathsheba became pregnant with David's child, David conspired to hide his sin by ordering Uriah into a dangerous battle, hoping he would die and the affair would remain undiscovered. Indeed, Uriah was killed on the battlefield, leaving Bathsheba alone and bearing the guilt. After Uriah's death, David quickly married Bathsheba, but their sin did not escape God's judgment. The death of their first child was seen as punishment from God. However, in their sorrow and repentance, God showed his mercy by granting them another child, Solomon. Solomon's birth was not only a gift from God, but also a sign of reconciliation between heaven and earth. Solomon grew up in a royal family, but his life was far from peaceful. He was raised amid the power struggles, intrigue, and ambitions of the palace. His half-brothers, including Adonijah, had ambitions to seize the throne, leading to numerous conflicts. From a young age, Solomon had to face challenges of loyalty and wisdom. Despite the royal turmoil, Solomon was guided by Nathan, a wise prophet and advisor. Nathan recognized Solomon's great potential and became his mentor, helping him cultivate wisdom and virtue. It was Nathan who persuaded King David that Solomon was the rightful heir, even though Solomon was not David's eldest son. As King David neared death, he officially appointed Solomon as his successor. However, Solomon was acutely aware that his position was not secure. He was only about 15 years old when he ascended the throne, and enemies still conspired to usurp his power. One of Solomon's first decisions was to carry out a harsh purge to solidify his authority, including the removal of Joab, a general loyal to Adonijah. Solomon's early life, though born out of a sinful relationship, was marked by God's selection and grace. He was not just a royal child, but the embodiment of reconciliation and mercy. With hidden wisdom and the guidance of wise men, Solomon was ready to step into the next phase of his life, where he would continue to demonstrate the wisdom granted by God. After ascending the throne, Solomon quickly realized that ruling a kingdom was no easy task, especially at such a young age. The challenges he faced came not only from external enemies, but also from within the kingdom, where power struggles constantly unfolded. In this context, Solomon knew he needed a weapon more powerful than soldiers or wealth. Wisdom point: one night, as Solomon slept, God appeared to him in a dream and asked what he desired. At this moment, Solomon could have easily requested wealth, power, or long life from God. Instead, he chose to ask God for a discerning heart, to govern his people with wisdom and fairness. This prayer not only reflected Solomon's humility, but also revealed his deep understanding of the responsibilities of a king. Solomon's request pleased God. Not only did God grant him superior wisdom, but he also gave him wealth and glory that Solomon had not asked for. God said that no one before or after him would possess wisdom like Solomon's. Because of this blessing, Solomon became the wisest king in biblical history, respected not only in Israel, but also in distant nations. Solomon's wisdom was soon displayed through his fair and insightful judgments. One of the most famous stories is when two women came before the king, disputing over a baby, with both claiming to be the mother. Both women had their own arguments, and neither would give in. In a situation where others might falter or give a wrong judgment, Solomon made a shocking suggestion. He ordered the baby to be cut in half, giving each woman one half. This judgment was not meant to be carried out, but to test the maternal love of the two women. When one of the women cried out, begging to give up the baby to save its life, Solomon immediately recognized her as the true mother. In this way, he not only discovered the truth, but also saved the child's life. This judgment spread throughout the kingdom, and people were astonished by the wisdom that God had given Solomon. However, Solomon's wisdom was not limited to court cases. He used his wisdom to strengthen the country, develop diplomatic relationships, and promote trade. Leaders from other nations often came to hear Solomon speak and seek his counsel. The Queen of Sheba, one of his most famous visitors, came to challenge Solomon with difficult questions. But with his wisdom, Solomon answered all her questions clearly and thoroughly, leaving her amazed and admitting that his wisdom far exceeded what she had heard. Thanks to this unparalleled wisdom, Solomon brought about a prosperous era for Israel. However, this wisdom, combined with power and wealth, also led Solomon into difficult situations, eventually contributing to his downfall. Solomon's reign was a period of unprecedented prosperity in Israel's history. With wisdom and talent, Solomon transformed Israel into a powerful kingdom, not only militarily, but also economically and culturally. His achievements not only helped Israel maintain stability and peace throughout his reign, but also solidified the nation's position in the eyes of neighboring countries. However, among all his notable accomplishments, the construction of the temple in Jerusalem was his most extraordinary feat from the beginning of his reign. Solomon determined to fulfill a sacred wish that his father, King David, had been unable to accomplish, to build a temple for God, which would become the spiritual and religious center of the entire nation of Israel. This temple was not only a symbol of Solomon's devotion to God, but also a symbol of the unity of Israel under his leadership. The temple in Jerusalem was built with meticulous care and unparalleled grandeur. The finest materials, including cedar wood from Lebanon, were imported and skillfully crafted. Thousands of craftsmen worked tirelessly for 7 years to complete the project. The temple measured 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, lined inside with cedar wood and decorated with pure gold. From the intricately carved walls to the smallest details, everything exuded solemnity and magnificence, befitting the house of God. The dedication of the temple was a grand event, gathering the entire people of Israel. On that day, Solomon prayed earnestly to God, asking for his blessings upon the people of Israel and for the temple to endure as a sacred place where God's people could come to pray and offer sacrifices. Immediately after Solomon finished his prayer, fire descended from heaven and consumed the offerings, symbolizing God's acceptance of the temple. For the people of Israel, this event confirmed God's blessing and presence among them. However, Solomon's accomplishments were not limited to building the temple. He turned Israel into a prominent center of trade and diplomacy. Through strategic alliances he formed with neighboring nations, particularly Egypt and the Kingdom of Tyre, Israel became a vital hub of commerce, attracting caravans and merchants from distant lands. This not only brought material wealth, but also allowed Israel to access knowledge and culture from other nations. During Solomon's reign, Israel did not experience war. The peace treaties he signed with surrounding nations helped maintain long-term stability. This was one of Solomon's greatest achievements, as he ensured his people lived in peace and prosperity. Additionally, Solomon was known for the luxury and opulence of his court. His palace, which took 13 years to complete, was another remarkable architectural work. The palace was not only the king's residence, but also the administrative and political center of the kingdom. Here, Solomon received leaders from around the world who came to marvel at Israel's prosperity and seek the advice of the wisest king of the time. The Queen of Sheba, one of the most famous visitors, embarked on a long journey to visit Solomon, bringing challenging questions to test his wisdom. After hearing Solomon easily answer all her questions, she had to admit that his wisdom and wealth far surpassed what she had heard. The respect shown by the Queen of Sheba and other leaders further solidified Solomon's position on the international stage. Solomon's reign was truly Israel's golden age. However, while his wisdom and achievements elevated him to the pinnacle of power, his personal weaknesses would soon drag him down into the depths. Besides being known as a great king with significant accomplishments, Solomon is also remembered as a talented writer, conveying profound knowledge through his famous literary works. His writings, including Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, are not only part of the Bible, but also gems of philosophy and ethics that have shaped the thoughts and lives of millions of people across generations. Proverbs is one of Solomon's most notable works, with over 3,000 philosophical sayings and practical advice for daily life. Proverbs contains wise counsel on living a righteous life, honoring piety, and fulfilling social obligations. One of Solomon's most famous sayings in Proverbs is, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." This saying emphasizes the importance of fearing and worshiping God as the foundation of all wisdom. For Solomon, wisdom did not only come from common knowledge, but must also stem from reverence and guidance from God. Proverbs are not just brief pieces of advice, but reflect how Solomon viewed life and human relationships. He advised treating others with honesty, kindness, and fairness. These proverbs have become guiding principles for many who seek wisdom and right living in a world full of temptations and challenges. While Proverbs is practical, Ecclesiastes is deeper in thought and philosophy of life. Ecclesiastes is one of Solomon's famous works in which he reflects on the meaning of life and the fleeting nature of the material world. Ecclesiastes begins with the famous saying, "Vanity of vanities, everything is vanity." This is a reminder that everything humans seek, wealth, power, and fame, is ultimately meaningless in the context of life and death. This work reveals Solomon's philosophical and introspective side as he contemplates human frailty and the need to seek God in life. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon not only recounts his own experiences, but also shares his thoughts on the values of life. He had experienced the heights of power, wealth, and wisdom, but in the end, he realized that all these things quickly pass. Solomon encouraged people not to place too much faith in material things, but instead to seek truth and salvation from God. Song of Songs, another work by Solomon, is entirely different from Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Song of Songs is a passionate and romantic love song, celebrating love and harmony between a man and a woman. This work is not just a story of human love, but also an allegory for the relationship between God and the people of Israel. Song of Songs is written with beautiful and vivid language, offering images of deep and enduring love that overcomes all challenges. In Song of Songs, Solomon describes love as an unquenchable flame, a powerful force that can overcome any obstacle. One of the famous lines from Song of Songs is, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death." These lines express the strength and persistence of love, a message of unwavering loyalty and devotion. Solomon's literary works are not just texts, but spiritual legacies, offering humanity lessons on wisdom, ethics, and love. These books have transcended time and space, becoming life guides for millions of people around the world. Although Solomon had flaws and made mistakes in his life, his literary legacy remains an essential part of the Bible and in the hearts of believers. Though Solomon was granted unparalleled wisdom and achieved great accomplishments, he could not avoid the temptations of the world. In his later years, even his wisdom and power could not save him from downfall. This began when he allowed foreign gods and pagan worship practices to infiltrate Israel, influenced by the foreign wives and concubines he had married from other nations. One of Solomon's greatest weaknesses was his love for women, especially foreign women. Throughout his reign, he married 700 wives and had 300 concubines, many of whom came from surrounding nations like Egypt, Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon. These marriages were initially political, helping to solidify alliances and maintain peace with other kingdoms. However, these marriages brought greater consequences than Solomon had anticipated. His wives not only brought their cultures, but also their gods and religious practices. Over the years, Solomon's foreign wives began persuading him to build temples and altars for their gods within Israel. Temples dedicated to deities like Ashtoreth, goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, god of the Moabites, and Molech, god of the Ammonites, were erected on high hills around Jerusalem, challenging Israel's pure monotheistic faith. The construction of pagan temples not only violated God's commandments, but also shook Solomon's loyalty to his ancestral faith. His heart, once a shining beacon of reverence for God, was now clouded by foreign influences. He was no longer as faithful to God as before, leaning instead toward the pagan beliefs introduced by his foreign wives. The worship of foreign gods was not just an act of disobedience, but a betrayal of the sacred covenant God had made with the people of Israel. God, witnessing Solomon's downfall, was greatly angered. He warned Solomon multiple times through prophets, reminding him of the consequences of worshiping foreign gods. But Solomon, caught up in his wealth, power, and infatuation with women, ignored these warnings. He continued to allow pagan worship to take place within his kingdom, gradually losing both God's favor and the trust of the people of Israel. Solomon's downfall was not only a story of disloyalty to God, but also a warning about the destructive power of greed and desire. Although he was given wisdom, wealth, and glory, he could not control the temptations brought by foreign gods and his wives. His soul, once seen as the embodiment of wisdom and loyalty, was now clouded by acts of betrayal against his faith. Solomon's actions led God to pass a harsh judgment. God declared that after Solomon's death, his kingdom would be divided and no longer unified. Solomon's descendants would not fully enjoy the glory of the kingdom of Israel that he had built. This warning was a clear sign that Solomon's disloyalty would not only affect him, but also future generations. Solomon's downfall is not just a story of personal sin, but a profound lesson about the loss of balance between wisdom and faith. He allowed his personal weaknesses and infatuations to take over, forgetting that everything he had came from God's grace. This ultimately led him from the height of wisdom and power to the depths of decline. As Solomon's downfall deepened, it not only affected him personally, but also had severe consequences for the kingdom of Israel. From being a king blessed with unmatched wisdom and extreme wealth, Solomon became the image of betrayal and disloyalty to God. His disobedience and idol worship provoked God's anger, and God decided that Solomon's dynasty would no longer be maintained in unity and prosperity as before. God judged Solomon with a stern warning: "Since you have done this and have not kept my covenant, I will tear the kingdom from your hands and give it to one of your servants." Though Solomon could not turn back, God's mercy was still shown to him because of the promise he had made to King David, Solomon's father. Therefore, God decided not to divide the kingdom during Solomon's lifetime, but after his death, his son would inherit a kingdom already divided. This signaled the beginning of the decline of a once glorious dynasty. Shortly after God declared this judgment, the kingdom of Israel began to experience rebellions and internal conflicts. One of the greatest threats came from Jeroboam, one of Solomon's servants. Jeroboam, secretly anointed by the prophet Ahijah and prophesied to rule over 10 tribes of Israel after the kingdom's division, became a symbol of resistance against Solomon's dynasty. Not only did Jeroboam apply pressure from within, but enemies from outside also began to rise up. In Solomon's later years, foreign enemies such as Hadad the Edomite and Rezin the Syrian rebelled, causing disturbances along the borders of the kingdom. These uprisings were not only signs of military weakness, but also the direct consequence of Solomon losing God's loyalty and the people's trust. A kingdom once strong under the wise hands of a king was now facing challenges on all sides. Although Solomon made efforts to consolidate the kingdom and suppress the rebellions, his downfall left indelible marks. The kingdom of Israel, once united and strong under the reigns of David and Solomon, now stood on the verge of division, just as God had foretold. In his later years, Solomon likely realized his mistakes. He gradually understood that everything he had built, everything he had believed in, was beginning to crumble. Wisdom and power, the things that once helped him reach the pinnacle, could no longer save him from the consequences of his wrong decisions. Solomon, who once ruled with fairness and insight, now faced the bitter defeat of his own making. When Solomon passed away, he left behind a kingdom that was no longer stable. His son, Rehoboam, inherited the throne but could not maintain the unity of the nation. Under Rehoboam's weak rule and the rise of Jeroboam, the kingdom of Israel was divided into two: the northern kingdom called Israel, consisting of 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom called Judah, which only included the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. This division marked the end of Solomon's prosperous dynasty and the beginning of a tumultuous period in Israel's history. God's judgment on Solomon was not only the end of a dynasty, but also a clear warning about the consequences of straying from faith and the covenant. Solomon had been given everything: wisdom, wealth, and power, but all of it became meaningless when he failed to remain loyal to God. Solomon's story is a testament that even the wisest and most powerful individuals can fall if they allow desires and temptations to overshadow their loyalty and faith. Although Solomon's life ended with his downfall and the division of his kingdom, the legacy he left behind continued to resonate through generations. Solomon was not only a king of unparalleled wisdom and vast power, but also a figure who profoundly influenced the culture, religion, and philosophy of Israel and the world. What he built, from the Great Temple to his classic literary works, remains as symbols of wisdom and spiritual strength. One of Solomon's most important legacies is the Temple in Jerusalem. Built by his command and the greatest work of its time, the temple was not only a place of worship for God, but also a sacred symbol of loyalty and devotion. This temple became the spiritual and religious center of the people of Israel, where they would come to pray and offer sacrifices to God. Although the temple was destroyed in wars, its significance and importance remain deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people of Israel, and it is regarded as the most sacred place in their religious history. Solomon's legacy is also reflected in the great literary works he left behind. Books like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs are not just literary works, but moral and philosophical lessons, written with the profound wisdom that God granted him. Solomon's Proverbs, offering advice on life, honesty, and reverence for God, remain relevant to this day. From concise and sharp sayings to philosophical reflections on the meaning of life, these works have become an inseparable part of the Bible and continue to influence the thoughts and ethics of millions of people worldwide. Additionally, Solomon left behind a legacy of wisdom in governance and kingdom management. Although his kingdom was divided after his death, the years of his reign are remembered as a golden age of Israel, when the nation achieved unprecedented prosperity and peace. Solomon's wisdom in negotiating trade agreements and building international alliances made Israel a major center of trade and culture in the region. This not only helped Israel flourish, but also positioned the nation at the center of international trade, drawing attention and respect from other countries. The Queen of Sheba, one of the most famous figures in the Bible, undertook a long journey to meet Solomon, bringing difficult questions to test his wisdom. After meeting and hearing Solomon's answers, she acknowledged that his wisdom and wealth far exceeded what she had heard. The meeting between the Queen of Sheba and Solomon was not only personal recognition of his wisdom, but also a symbol of Israel's international influence under Solomon's reign. However, Solomon's legacy is not just confined to material achievements or wisdom. His story of downfall, though tragic, also leaves a valuable lesson about human nature. Great wisdom and power can be double-edged swords if not used with reverence and humility before God. Desires and temptations, even those that Solomon initially saw as necessary to consolidate power and protect the kingdom, ultimately became the main cause of his downfall. Solomon's story is a clear example of the complexity of human nature, even for those granted immense wisdom and power. Solomon built a great kingdom and left an indelible legacy, but he also lost his righteousness and loyalty to God. God's warning to Solomon that the kingdom would be divided after his death came true, marking the end of a mighty dynasty and opening a new, tumultuous chapter in Israel's history. Yet, the lessons from Solomon's life still resonate today. From great achievements to tragic mistakes, his life serves as a deep reminder that no matter how much wisdom and wealth one possesses, it is essential to remain steadfast in loyalty and morality. Solomon's legacy is not only found in the physical structures he left behind, but also in the lessons about life and faith, which will forever be associated with his name in the religious and cultural history of humanity. The conclusion of Solomon's story is not only a deep reminder of the complexity and frailty of human nature, but also a tragic tale of a king who had everything yet lost everything. From a man granted unparalleled wisdom, extreme wealth, and vast power by God, Solomon went from the heights of glory to the depths of downfall. The achievements he accomplished had elevated Israel to become a powerful nation, but his greed and desires led him astray from God, resulting in the collapse of his great dynasty. Solomon's legacy is a blend of greatness and failure, of wisdom and personal mistakes. But his story does not end with lessons about power and betrayal. It also serves as a reminder to all of us that, no matter how much success we achieve, we must face great temptations and challenges. Solomon's weaknesses reflect our own lives, that wisdom, talent, or power become meaningless if we let them erode our loyalty and humility before God. Solomon's story has ended, but his legacy lives on. The lessons we take from his life will continue to resonate, forming the foundation for the stories to come. We will continue to explore the consequences after Solomon's death, when his kingdom was divided and fell into a period of great turmoil. How will God's judgment affect the next generation? What challenges will the kingdom of Israel face when it loses the leadership of a king who was once a source of pride? Stay tuned for the next chapters as we delve into the stories behind the fall of the kingdom of Israel and the lessons from humanity's disobedience to God. Solomon left a deep mark, but his true legacy will be tested through the generations to follow. The stories of the kingdom of Israel are still unfolding, and they promise to bring invaluable lessons about faith, leadership, and the meaning of loyalty. Don't miss the journey ahead as we enter a new phase of Israel's history.